Hi, Julian here again. Welcome back. This is my second meeting with Stephen Bauman this year, February 2025. Zero. The first meetings video should be up on my channel already if you want to check it out. This past month, I worked on adding more value to my drawings, but unfortunately, I couldn't find the time to draw too much this month. So there's only one completed drawing and one half-done one, but I think the meeting went well regardless. Anyway, just a short intro. That's it for me. And I'm just going to hand you off to the meeting. See you later.
You mentioned some shading questions. And I noticed, of course, that there were kind of slightly different shading methods that you use in each one.
For this one on the screen, I'd meant to advance it a little more. I didn't find the time to do it. Mm-hmm. So it was on its way to the first one, but
yeah,
it just didn't get there, unfortunately.
Yeah, so this one's more kind of representative of the destination.
At least what I was going for, I wanted to do like a mass drawing approach like we discussed last month, but it didn't seem to be working out.
Is there a way to be more specific about that?
I think we mentioned something about losing some precision, and I think maybe I didn't go strong enough to do that. I'm not sure what you think about that.
Yeah. It's funny that when somebody practices kind of simplified drawing, specifically into structure, into line and stuff, the drawing like develops to a place where you have something that seems in some ways like quite realistic, and then when we make an additional transition into using value shapes instead of just line, it's confusing because the drawing structurally like holds together, but it's like the value masses are kind of like what their first linear drawings are. They're not like yet sure what to do with them. Like, how do you work with these things? Like, how does it function? But it's happening inside of drawing that looks like quite adequate. So it's, you know what I mean? There's like a contrast in between it. So figuring out how to use values and how to use masses is kind of its own, slightly separate issue, in that not only do you have the need to make the masses themselves, but then it's kind of, because it's drawing, it's also kind of a matter of like, how do you make them look good and right? And what kind of line weight do you use inside the shadow? And how do you decide where your variation inside the shadow is? There's a whole other group of choices that you have to take that are now a part of like integrating mass into the work. So yeah, I think it's quite understandable that those things would seem a little bit strange. In addition to that you're adding and utilizing halftone as like a part of that goal incorporates yet another thing that we need to talk about, organize, and understand, like kind of how it works, right? So I
was
see,
actually trying to avoid that.
Yeah.
And the halftone that's there is actually mostly my hand smudging on the face. I wanted to zero in on the shadow and light dichotomy, the separation more. At the very least, that's what I should accomplish here, is to separate the lights from the shadows.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, I think that's it's relatively effective. I mean, in the sense, all right, let's squint down and look at this. That light shape emerges. So, like, I think you have to look at that and say that's successful. For me, what I'm looking at then is, how did we do that? Like, what choices are taken when doing that? How are you designing the shapes? How are you using edges? How are you making different shapes kind of merge together to kind of create as similar an impression as possible? So there's some things that I think are really valid and useful, and other things that I think probably can be chucked out a bit. Partly with an eye towards other things as well, meaning like it's perfectly fine to get the light shape to pop out, and that's cool. But that's like one part of a bigger plan, which is make stuff look real, right? So how we get the light shape to pop out and what we do in the areas around it matters also in terms of like later goals and how this applies to kind of later goals. The thing that strikes me first, right, is actually not the light shape itself, though there's a couple things there. It's that these areas with their inclusion don't form the same silhouette as what this one does, right? So values and masses so much are about how things group together, right? And seeing mass as well is seeing how they group and then understanding the slight way in which they diverge, right? So to me, these edges here are all very kind of divergent in a way, like they don't hold together in the way that you... I wonder if Iggy jumped up on my lap and saw your cat, if she would bark. Come on. Oh, that's a good girl.
Oh,
Want to say hi to Julian?
I think I haven't
Hey.
seen Iggy before.
Cornelia brought me a coffee, so this is why we are here. Oh, gross.
Oh, cute.
Yeah, that's really separated, eh? Sorry, Julian. 1 second.
It's
What did
okay.
you put in it?
Hi, Papa.
Sorry, Julian.
I
I
wanna
asked
trade.
Cornelia because I had a meeting coming out. Oh, there's a door. Iggy would have barked. Iggy would have barked.
Oh,
She would have
really?
seen it.
Oh.
Well, no, maybe not. I don't know if she understands totally dogs through TV yet.
Okay.
But no, I asked Cornelia to make me a coffee, and she was very kind to do it. This is not interesting. Back to your shapes.
Oh, it is very interesting. I'm very into specialty coffee. I don't know if it's like that.
I'm
anymore.
incredibly into specialty coffee, in fact. So
great.
this is a conversation. Yeah. Espresso blends, and before I was a homeowner and had a mortgage, I would order from them in Norway. Like I would have them send coffee, or it's kind of insane.
Oh, fun.
But masses of value. Otherwise, I'll talk coffee the whole time.
All right.
What you would like to have happen, right, is for these shapes to differentiate with your eyes wide open, and to sort of stand together, to close in together when you squint down, which will create eventually a strong silhouette. Now, this is something like you should look for. Look at portrait paintings. Look at artwork that's being created, not necessarily photographs. I mean, we can see it in a photograph, but it's helpful to see it interpreted by an artist. But you'll see that an artist would take this everything from 16th century onward. Once we got past the idea of like linear definition of things and into the idea of like masses of value. That you'll see this I would almost call it like a style of envisioning the subject that really incorporates this divergence, right? So that we have strong silhouettes like this one that hold together, and then we come to passages like this, which in this drawing is being treated like a strong silhouette. Then in some ways it's not totally wrong. But if I were drawing this, that would be like the weaker silhouette of the two, and that this would be like, for me, the stronger shape, right? And in doing so, I'm going to mimic not only like the value structure of the subject, but I'm also going to get a sense of that impression, like, for lack of a better phrase, I guess this is not a bad phrase, but that kind of in the room feeling, right? Like that's what you get. This stands out a little bit, and the stuff inside there really kind of falls away, and that's what we want to happen. Here, it's almost as if the stuff that's inside the shadow is what stands out first, right? Through these like sharper contrasts and sharper edges, and that it's secondary that you see those strong silhouettes that we're looking for. Now, and this is where the kind of, I think of it as kind of a freedom in a way. This is where the freedom comes in, is that it really doesn't matter, like, technically speaking, how did you get to that place where where you have that cohesion and that unity, whether it's a bit of a paper stump, whether it's like, building up just with your pencil. I've gone through so many different versions of it and seen them kind of come to fruition, that it's less important how and more important like how it looks.
Mm-hmm.
So the saying in, I think it's generally reserved for like hockey in Canada. It's where I've heard it. Not that I watch a lot of hockey anyway, but I happen to know this. There's a saying like, they don't ask how, they ask how many, right? Mm-hmm. So they don't ask how you won the championship. It's that they ask how many you won. Mm-hmm. I feel like there's a little bit of that. I remember Ivan Loganov expressing something like this. It was like, the Russian mentality was like, oh shit, what was it? It's like if the horse finishes the race, like it doesn't matter how it won. I don't know. There was some version of that was like very, but it sounded very funny to me. It was like the horse is out of the barn. They don't ask, whatever. I don't know what the phraseology was, but this idea that it's how it looks, not how you got to how it looks, technically speaking, right? Uh-huh. And that's what preserves a certain level of like autonomy and creativity in representational art is that it like there are procedures, and up to a point, sampling those procedures is really, really interesting, but then also understanding that those procedures are part of a goal, which is to say, like, our goal is to get to that impression. And there's a way that you can do that is particular or whatever. So I don't want to get like too much into the weeds of like, oh, let's talk about creativity and art and so on. Because really we're just talking about how do we make a good mass drawing. But I only bring all this up so that you can understand, like, yeah, you'll figure out how to get some soft edges. You'll figure out how to get, contours and silhouettes like this to reveal themselves. But it's not that you're married to that forever. Like that's drawing. That's a part of drawing. It's like, it's a thing that you can do. And then you can kind of freelance and do other stuff as well. But even you see, like on this side, I think it would be very much the same thing that I would expect, that the silhouette would be both the interior silhouette of like the light of her versus the dark of her hair, and that should kind of bond together with that exterior silhouette. Then we can get into, of course, like what is a duotone shadow and how does that affect what we see, right? And how to like technically make that work. But for starters, I think it's like kind of arriving in this place. Make sense?
Yeah, I mean, what I'm getting for the most part, if I'm going to dumb it down a bit, is that I should get more unity in the shadow shapes.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
But the why is, I think, what is most valuable and important here. In fact, so I was driving. I'm a driver now. I just got my license. I was driving on the highway yesterday, and this is just like the strangest of my life, but I was thinking about this little drawing quirk that some drawing students get that really like eats me up. It bothers the crap out of me to see it. I just think it's so unattractive and it's so like narrow focus. But it's when they start to learn about shadow and light, right? So they learn this. Where we have a shadow shape and a light shape. What they start to do is they start to like outline both sides of the shadow. And again, I recognize, like, why am I upset about this? I don't know, man. That's just who I am. They outline both sides of the shadow with kind of the same kind of intensity, right? Because the teachers are all telling them shadow shape, shadow shape, shadow shape, shadow shape, map out the shadow shape. So they do that, but they do it in this way that's like so flat. Like it's like the flattest thing that you could ever do is to like box in a shadow like this. And it's kind of like sorted debatably negligibly with the idea that you're going to add halftone to it and kind of make it round. But just nothing about it, or it seems so much like kind of going across the river to get a drink of water to me. Like, I don't know if you like see it, if you see it, why would you ever draw it that way? If you see it how it actually is, because it's not like that. there's an edge hierarchy in mass. So that what you should be doing is utilizing those harder edges where you find them, and letting those soft edges like be soft. I mean, that's how light works. That's how the visual phenomenon works. Like, so why are we doing this thing that's like totally different from that? It's this kind of learned behavior that takes place because of oversimplified teaching, which is kind of what you get in ateliers. I make that sound really bad. I mean, it's kind of how you have to be if you have like 10 teachers or whatever that are all like nominally teaching the same thing. So you kind of have to like really simplify into a narrow wedge to make it work. But like clearly the more efficient option is to have that edge hierarchy and understand it in relationship to the light. Do these few simple changes to the edges that you're working with, and all of a sudden, instead of having a shitty flat looking block in, you have like a drawing that actually looks like a drawing, right? Yeah. Now, you could be forgiven for thinking that I'm kind of talking about this, which is okay. I use strong language to describe it.
Oh, that's okay.
But yeah, so those edges which are like turning away, I think, like I said, as soon as you realize you can recognize that there is a shadow edge, that means, I think, immediately that you can recognize that there are two shadow edges, at least two types. So I would have the expectation that would arrive along with your kind of recognition of this edge, right? Like that particular kind of silhouette, and how that kind of strengthens the impression. That would look like a pretty decent mass drawing. Although you do start to see the holes in mass drawing that kind of develop when you do this, because then you have to start to ask the question, well, where is this and where is this in depth? Like if you look at a face from the front versus looking at a face from the side, you see like her jaw is here and like the back of her hair that you're seeing is like here. Okay, but now we're saying those are like on the same like flat depth. And this is, to me, like, I think where you get a problem with the whole, well, I think really any school that focuses on like fast mass that isn't duotone, I think it gets flat really, really fast. So the next thing that you want to do after that is figure out, well, how do I work in two values in the shadow in like a meaningful way so that I still get that strong silhouette, but I have enough difference here that it shows up as being like two different depths, right? The one thing's kind of in front of the other. And then you also get that opportunity to do, I think, what you're interfacing with up here, which is what happens when those values become the same value? What do you do at that point? And then you have your lost edges, right? And that's that kind of atmospheric feeling that eventually we get from good mass drawing, is where we have edges that show up in between the two and edges that also kind of dissipate and fade into one another. Make sense?
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
So I would kind of phrase this as, just organizational strategy that should get help you kind of get over the hump of your first proper stab at mass drawing.
Do you think it would be helpful to do pure mass drawings over structural and then to mass, or?
I don't know. You could make an argument for either one and say like, okay, it'd be good to do because you'd just be straight up working in like these blocks of value. At the same time, you could alternatively say that, well, while you're doing that, your structure is going to be so wonky that, you're just making sure you make kind of wonky drawings in a way. Now, when mass was presented to me, but let's flesh out, because it's not a bad idea. It's just, is it the best idea? And we need to kind of analyze it to know. It was presented to me as a proposition that we should find all of our structure in the way that it lines up with the relevant visual information. So, in theory, the shadow edge itself, right, does pass over structurally significant and symmetrical areas. It does. So can you communicate that structural information just by working in the mass? Yes. However, the overwhelming tendency that I find when people work in mass is they get like what I call this Phantom of the Opera effect. That basically you have this large light shape, right? That floats around within the boundaries of this kind of surrounding dark shape. Meaning like it's not like one's not like attached to the other. Does that make sense? The easiest way to imagine
like
this,
a mask, the Phantom of the
yeah,
Opera.
yeah, like just a mask that's just sitting in this. The easiest way to think of this would be if all of this value was totally unified. Like, how would you judge whether this side of the face and the other side were structurally symmetrical? Well, you'd really only have the light shape to go by. To me, that's way too limiting. And I think it hides way too much. Even just doing this to this drawing, it's a ploy that I see all the time, but I can't help but think it's a really bad one. Like, it's really ineffective. Like, not being able to see the depth in between these two things, I think is a massive error, especially when it comes to portraiture. You can get away with it a little bit in the figure because, I think we're like less zoomed in generally on stuff. Like the figure is usually smaller when it's drawn. So like the stuff that you're hiding is like, in a way, smaller of less significance. Whereas like a portrait is there. It's like in your face. Sometimes you're doing a life-size head. You can't like flatten things out like that's too much. Yeah. What lead are you using for this?
For the shadows, I use the 2B, and for the structural part, I use an HB.
Okay. Yeah, that's sensible. Yeah, I mean, you might even consider going a little bit softer in the shadows. The softer the lead that you use, the easier it is to kind of push around. To the point where, like, if I'm using 8 or 9B or something, I can smudge it out almost completely, like just with my finger, if I wanted to. As I noticed that, like some of what you're facing is that you're kind of getting this hatchiness versus the kind of flatness that you're going for, and it's an uncomfortable kind of interface.
Yeah, I think that I was kind of confused. It sounds so weird to say. I don't know how to hold the pencil when I'm doing this.
Yeah. Well, usually far enough back is pretty good. Yeah. But then,
I mean,
like,
the
I
angle
get
at
that.
which it attacks the paper. Yeah.
Yeah. You mean like if the paper is like this, whether it's like at that angle or at like this angle?
Yeah.
Like that? Yeah.
But I think what you said before, it doesn't matter how the horse.
They don't ask how, they ask how many.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know what? Yeah, maybe this is the adaptation. They don't ask how, they ask how it looks.
Mm-hmm.
Or I guess they would see how it looks. They wouldn't ask how it looks.
Yeah.
All right, so the other drawing, if I can find it, has a where are we? Yeah, it has a series of block-in state, or this one it has at least two.
Yeah.
stages. Right. Yeah. I think that the structural stuff is kind of coming along, obviously quite well. And it's interesting to see you like adapting structural thinking to like, how do you block in hair? Which is like its own particular kind of issue.
Yeah.
But not one like without sort of, merit in investigation, I think, by the way, wow, really good structure in the lower half of the lower 2/3 of the face. I mean, and even actually the whole head there, I think structurally has a really great read. I mean, you almost get a feeling of three-dimensionality from it, just like on its own. That there's an ear missing is weird.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I lost it
it
in the
happens.
there.
Yeah. Then when you get down to the neck, actually, I think that it is a. I don't know if the me that is a total drawing nerd or like is why I think of this, but the attachment of the head to the body is a thing. And if you're going to get into portraiture, you're going to get into necks. Unless everybody's
Yeah.
wearing a turtleneck, you're going to get into connecting the head of the body. So with that in mind, there's a couple of things that you need to know and hit every time. The pit of the neck is significant because both sides of the sternocleidomastoid come down and attach to it. Why the sternocleidomastoid is important is really for several reasons. Usually we think, oh, okay, well, we see this coming down and that's significant that it's the sternocleidomastoid. Yes. But also we have this one going up on the other side, where does the shadow edge happen to fall? Well, directly across the sternocleidomastoid, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we kind of don't really know much about like what it is and where it's pointing, what it's doing, maybe we don't make that edge as articulate as we could. And then of course there's the like attendant little bits and bobs that kind of like come off of the sternocleidomastoid, right? This is the third section of the sternocleidomastoid. So the clavicular section of it, right, where the clavicle kind of comes across like this, and this little strand kind of comes out and attaches to the inner third of that.
Mm-hmm.
So just knowing that like one thing, I think kind of like helps you draw a neck generally better, instead of, like going, oh, there's some stuff around there, or, even worse, that you make it like just this very kind of generic shape, that's just like that and like that. That'd be bad. So pit of the neck, sternocleidomastoid. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a simple thing, but you got to know those things. And then, I mean, it's helpful to know also that like the trapezius is what kind of comes, like that's the next thing. So you have several muscles kind of behind the sternocleidomastoid that are kind of coming down, and then you got the trapezius that kind of comes out from behind the head out across the shoulder. Yeah. So familiarize yourself with a few of those things because they have the same kind of like structural significance as like what you find up here. Like the clarity with which you're like finding these kind of lines and angle breaks and this symmetry can be extended very much into like what we find in the neck as well. Like that to me would be a significant way to kind of work with these this area so that you knew a bit of what was happening there.
Mm-hmm.
Though I don't know that anatomy necessarily is like. There's a lot of people that draw pretty well without anatomy. Like that is a true thing. So I don't, you know what I mean? Like, is it for nerds? I guess if it's like if you find an aptitude or an interest in it, then learn about it. But like, don't ignore it if it's not interesting to you. You don't have to know everything, I guess is my point. I know plenty of people who know everything, but I'm not sure that their like art is like all that much better because of that. Like, it's more anatomical. I don't know if it's better, I guess it kind of depends on like what you're doing here in the first place, you know, like what do you believe that you're doing with your time, you know? Not to get too existential, but like, are we researchers? Are we like art makers? Are we using art to connect to people? Or are we using art to look deeper into something? Mm-hmm. You know, this depends. Yeah. So this one turned into value in a slightly uncomfortable way.
Yeah.
Was this the first of the two?
No, this was the second one, actually.
Let's talk a little bit about like the character of shadow shapes themselves. Right. So shadows, obviously, we think about light hitting the form, right? So light hits the form. Oh, I need a much smaller brush to express this. I want to talk about like this eye socket on the right. So we have, say, if we like sliced through the forehead like this, right? And like look down the side of it. In theory, we'd have like an edge like this that receded into the eye socket, and then the eyelid that kind of comes out, and then the surface of the eye or whatever. So the light is like hitting this form like at this kind of oblique angle. And the light is kind of continuing across this form. All these straight rays of light are hitting this form and raking across it. There's a point at which the form of the forehead eclipses the light. So here, those straight facing light rays rake the surface and then cease to be able to hit the surface through here. That form, of course, I mean, some of this you know, casts a shadow then over across to the next form and stops the light from hitting that. So we have light areas here and here because the light can reach them. And then we have this little zone inside the crevice where the light cannot hit. So when you're working in mass, it's not exactly your job to say this, like in a scientific way. You can just make a big, I mean, let's say we're painting. Maybe you just make a big brush stroke and go, that's where the darkness is, right? Mm-hmm. Like that's one mentality, and it's a fine mentality. And then there's another one where it's like, okay, but what is the actual character and shape of the shadow itself? There's two mentalities, both valuable. With this one in mind, what you rarely get out of this analysis is like a shape like that at the edge of a shadow. And the reason that you don't do that is because the light is trying to get everywhere. And the only way that you'd get a shadow like this is really if you had two forms coming together almost like this, right? Where the light would literally just not be able to like seep all the way up to that point. What happens more often than not is we have a more organic form, like say that looks maybe like this, where the bottom of that trough is kind of rounded. And so we end up with usually these kind of slightly more rounded ends to the shadows. So like even if you look at this one, which is in some ways like apparently quite sharp, I don't see that as like ultimately the sharpest point of all the shadows you can come up with. And it's the same thing through here. Like if I analyze like where is the actual shadow itself, it has like a little bit more of a rounded characteristic to it. You see here, right? We have that point. Why do we have that? Because the forms come together like this, into this very tight crease. Mm-hmm. But if you're not coming into that very tight crease, why are we going to have an edge like that, right? Same thing with the shadow down here. It's actually a lot more kind of rounded off at the end than it is necessarily like full on sharp. There's one thing that I try to remove from the character of shadows as I define them is like I'll never or almost never do like get like a point out at the edge of a shadow shape. It just looks artificial, looks kind of like fake to me when I see it drawn that way. Make sense? So like when you come back to this one and you kind of mapping those out, you know, to me, I think I'd look at, you know, shapes that were a little bit more organic, had a little bit less of that kind of pointy feeling to them, you know. Same thing through here, to kind of like make those a little bit more blunt at their boundaries. Yeah. Then this one's a particular concern as well, and it's almost specific to what happens at the bottom edge of the jaw and chin. Because the shadow edge itself is so close to like the edge of the form, I find that when we draw this way, it ends up looking like that is the edge of the form. Does that make sense? So it causes this kind of like weird feeling when you're looking back and forth that like, oh, like our face is a bit smaller than it seems, you know? Which is why I'm always in favor of like, so I'm always in favor of this being like a little bit of a turning edge, more so than I would be in other cases, like that. I think it has more of an impact here than it does in other cases. In addition to that, I think that like when you look at this, that to me seems like a slightly oversimplified shape edge, right?
Yeah.
So like when you look at this one, I see where it can be simplified like that. But again, I feel like, again, that's like an oversimplification. Like I'd be in favor of having, you know, maybe 3 angle breaks there to where you could actually kind of make a statement or see maybe where one was pointing to instead of just, instead of just that kind of single like monoline kind of idea, you know. It just gives a little bit more character to it. Like in general, of course, like you're trying to strike that balance in between, you know, what's simple enough and then what's oversimplified. You know, at times that's going to be like, well, there's stuff you know about and stuff you don't know about. At other times it's just going to be that you erred on the side of being really simple instead of like adding another angle break. So I'm not always in favor of like going down to like one big angle, just because I feel like, you know, I think there's opportunities to like see things on the other side of form that like if you don't have that extra angle break, then it doesn't really become like a meaningful like kind of symmetrical comparison. Or even just that your drawing can just look so generic that it's difficult to like reel that in, you know, and like to go from being totally generic into becoming quite organic and complex. But I think it's like something I've always erred on the side of. And, you know, it reminds me of is like when I was at school, there was always the guy that was like really, you know, gung-ho, good soldier, right? Because what teachers will say all the time is like, oh, simplify, simplify, simplify. Everything needs to be simple, simple, straight lines. Everything's simple, everything's straight lines. And then somebody would do that. And by the end of like 3 years, they'd be making drawings that were like, you know, like so simple. They were just like big boxes, you know, with like a line in the center, like, and like, yeah, that's the simplest thing, and it's all straight lines, and it fucking sucks. Like, there's nothing good about it. It's just like you've followed all the rules to a T. Good job. Like, but you didn't make a drawing. Like, you were the good soldier, as I see it. And then, like, I would always reflect that, okay, simplicity and complexity are about balance. We don't want the complexity because we're bad students. We want it because it looks like stuff. Things are complex, you know? So we're trying to show that by adding some information. So I always felt like there was this tension in the balance in between like simplicity and complexity, that I inherently want to add things in. But if I add too many, it becomes unmanageable. So my job is to figure out what's manageable and what's like oversimplified. How do you balance those two? And like that's what this kind of, it's a long story to say this, but that's what this kind of amounts to me, is eventually like a line that just is a little bit oversimplified.
Okay.
Yeah. Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. Julian,
Yeah.
we're coming towards the end,
Oh, right.
but I wonder if there's any topics on your mind? Thoughts you have? Questions?
If you have any additional thoughts for what I should be doing in the next month, I'm thinking just more of the same. Maybe try to find more time.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, yeah, like keep this momentum going and, continue drawing in mass. I think that you're probably on the edge of finding the balance in between kind of mass and structure. As you go on, you'll figure out, slightly more efficient ways to go about that. But I do feel like it's probably quite important that two things happen. One, that you solve a little bit more the unity problem, right?
Okay.
Figuring out how to truly make them masses. Like right now they have value in them, but I'm not sure that they are masses per se. That makes sense. And then also two edges. If you don't have two different types of edges, I think that we're kind of fulfilling the letter of the law and saying, all right, we have a dark thing and a light thing. We're not really like mimicking the subject in a way that's most helpful.
Mm-hmm. Hard and soft edges.
But specifically, just one and the other. It's not so many edges. It's two types.
Okay.
Right? You have an edge that you can identify that is like, say, this edge, or you have an edge that is, say, like, even this, I would say, is a relatively hard edge. And then you have softer transitional edges. If you can manage those two, and I mean, just like anything, it's kind of within reason. Like, of course, there's not literally two, but like that's soft, that's not. If you can arrive there and figure that dynamic out, when you arrive at good masses of value, you'll also have a drawing that kind of looks like the subject.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then it's on into halftones.
Ah, scary.
Which is a lot. No, it is genuine. It's like, because I think the thing about halftones too is that it's so, there's so much of it that it's very hard to stagger your integration of halftone into the drawing, because putting a tiny bit of halftone in doesn't really satisfy what halftone is, and then putting a lot of it in is like a huge, massive bite to take out of the sandwich,
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah, but we'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be good. Julian, I think I'm okay. If you got anything else?
Yeah, I'm good. Happy Valentine's.
We were talking about that at breakfast this morning. Cornelia's like, I didn't put anything on the calendar because it's Valentine's. It's like, I did.
Oh no.
Well, yeah. It's. We'll figure something out.
Okay. Well,
All right,
have a good
Julian.
one.
Take care of yourself, bud.